We believe that collaborative conversations will lead to better outcomes in the world of mental health. Welcome to the Lift and Make Lighter podcast.
Ben, if you don't mind, give us some background on you and Cecilie, and just kind of how would you introduce the I don't know, is it a lifelong relationship? But it's a long relationship.
It feels almost lifelong at this point. We and not necessarily because of the number of years, but probably because of the amount of work that we've really done together. She and I have carried common clients. I don't know how many years, but lots of them. In fact, we, kind of carrying a couple right now. In fact, one of them just reached out to me and said she wrapped up with you and that she's just feeling way better about things. And I told her I'm really anxious to hear about the work that you did with her. So really, our relationship started. I was working with Arden, and we were running Therapia, which was an adult residential substance abuse program here in St. George. And I was also a bishop in my church. And so between the two, and really it started as a referral of one of the members of my ward, my congregation, to Cecilie, who is turns out to be probably the best marriage and family therapist, couples therapist I think I know. But I think, man, right at the same time, you were also working with a couple, and the husband was really struggling with his addiction and just couldn't get past it, couldn't get really honest about it. And so back and forth, she and I were referring people and working together to help these couples and families. And I guess that's kind of the story. And it's just never, it's never really ended. I'll be working with somebody in the addiction world, and we'll get to a point where they need, somebody who can really kind of dig into. She does a thing, and I know you'll talk about it, but called lifespan reintegration, which is, in my mind, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, that is kind of a maybe quicker, more abridged version of EMDR to a certain extent, where you're accessing the brain and helping them process traumas so that their response to that trauma becomes very different than it's been. And I don't know how many times I've hit somebody that they're just stuck, and we find out, oh, there's trauma here, and there's a lot of trauma here. My first call is always Cecilie, always. So there.
Thank you.
That's it.
A year ago, we were at a conference, and I learned this whole last year by spending time with Ben and Arden at conferences. They were at another organization. They had not joined LÉVO yet. But as I went to conference after conference, I continued to realize, one, Ben and Arden are known throughout the state. Two, at first I was like, Ben and Arden, is that a full name? Is Ben and Arden a full name?
Is that a one person, or is that?
They don't just do that in Hollywood. They do that in St. George too. at least we do here.
Right, exactly. But they were known, and then I started to realize the integrity, the character, of them by who they introduced me to. And so we were at a conference with them, and they said, "You got to meet this woman. This woman's so classy, so good at what she does." And then they introduced me to you, Cecilie, and I recognized quickly that there was something about your composure in who you are. And I just thought for a second, this is a person who is changing lives because she's comfortable and confident in her own self.
Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. And you can just feel that from you. And because we meet with so many mental health professionals, it's interesting how many we meet who are just, you can tell they've done their own work. So as you introduce yourself, will you talk a little bit about that? What led you to the industry? And what allows you to sit that way, just comfortable in self so that you can be present for others?
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I'm glad that you sense that and feel that. I don't think that it's once and done. I think that we have to continually be doing our own work. And I always knew that I was going to be in this profession, which sounds funny to me to even say it. But even as a young teenager, I feel like it came to me more than I went out looking for it. Maybe it's because I'm a middle child. I don't know. But I think at a young age, I learned to be an observer. And I think that good practitioners, whether it's a therapist or a doctor or anyone in the helping profession, needs to be a healthy and attentive observer. And I think that has helped me want to understand. I'm a curious person. I love to ask questions. I love to try to understand. I would much rather be the one asking the questions and answering the questions. That's not been my most comfortable place. But I think, too, when early on, I graduated in psychology. I worked in drug and alcohol, worked in a rehab facility, worked in a couple of different circumstances with registered sex offenders as well as youth sex offenders. And so my foundation was based on addiction to start with. And that was a huge part of what I think really connected Ben and I, was the fact that we could speak the same language and I could see what he was able to do. But it was hard. It really has been hard to find good drug and alcohol counselors, people that really understand addiction in a non-shaming manner. And addiction, whether it's a substance or whether it's a behavior, addiction is addiction. And when we don't understand why someone is seeking to numb or alter, we can't really help them if we don't understand it. So in my experience in working earlier, I mean, this would have been 30 years ago, working in addiction, I knew that these individuals had trauma that needed to be healed, but I wasn't a therapist yet, and I wasn't trained as I wasn't trained as a trauma therapist at this point. So I knew that even in rehab, we were giving them tools, but we weren't helping them heal. And I just remember always thinking, I wish we could give them more. I wish we could give them, but that's not what rehab is set up for. Rehab is a totally different goal. We've got to get them sober. We've got to get them stabilized, and then the hope is that the healing will continue on. So I got to work in those capacities early on, and when I chose to get my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, even then my emphasis was very much on couples work and systems theory. It was everything around how does this, not just this one person that's sitting in front of me, how are they being affected by their life, but how is everything that's in their system, everything that's sitting on the couch with them that I'm not seeing, how are they being affected by that? And so even whether I had a couple or whether I had an individual on my couch, I knew that they were sitting there with maybe a difficult boss or a couple of hard twins or a teenager or a difficult divorce they were going through. And if I didn't understand those pieces, that system, I couldn't help them. And so I'm really grateful that from a systems standpoint, I received that training. I feel like it's very much suited me, even if at the time I didn't fully understand how much it would align with the way I see life and healing and individuals. And so in that process of then practicing as a marriage and family therapist, that's when I began to realize that people are coming into my office not looking for advice. They're not looking for tips and guidance. They are coming in totally dysregulated. Their nervous systems are activated. They're not sleeping. They're either eating too much or they can't eat at all. They want to feel better physically. And so that's where the trauma training and really focusing on becoming a good trauma therapist became important to me. But it's been the coolest experience to be able to work with couples even and do trauma work with each individual so that they are able to show up for each other as a married couple more effectively. But along even the same lines of what LÉVO is doing, there are quite a few situations that I've worked with where I've had maybe a woman come in and I'm doing an initial assessment or intake session with her, and I'm starting to notice this feels much more like biology. This is not relational. especially when I'm being told everything was great and I loved my spouse and now I can't stand the smell of him, or I can't even be in the same room with them, or I can't interact with my kids. I don't want to be around them. My anxiety's through the roof. And that's when I think, you know what, we can definitely work together and help soften what you're feeling, but let's get your body looked at. Let's get your biology looked at and see if there's hormones that need to be balanced, other things. So from that systems standpoint, I am looking at the psycho, biosocial, sometimes spiritual, all of those elements as far as the physical. What is it that they need as a whole, not just let's fix this one problem or get this one person out of your life that's making life hard. That's, I think, where we do damage, is when we have therapists or coaches that teach individuals how to abandon ship rather than understand what's really going on this ship.
Yeah.
Is there a way is there something I need to do different? Do I need to change something? And really begin understanding themselves in it.
So good. So good. When you go back to the biopsychosocial model, let's just speak in systems theory for a second, because Ben and I talk about it every day. At LÉVO right now, we're talking systems every day. If one part of the system is off, symptom, then you may be focused on one area that's not great. Let's call it, in a marriage, a symptom may be we're not communicating well. But how do you get to the root cause of that? So if a couple comes in and you see they're talking about communication, but in reality, the root cause of what is causing the symptom may not be communication. It may be, you said trauma.
Yeah.
So will you go back to that?
Yeah.
Why is trauma, or why are some of those root cause things oftentimes overlooked, or maybe it's not even a consideration in the process for why the system is off, and why sometimes professionals focus on the symptom versus getting to that root cause? I mean,
this is such an important conversation. There's so much focus on symptoms, and we miss the cause.
And that is what I think, as the layperson, what we're doing, whether it's eat the French fries or drink the alcohol or take the extra pill before the kids get home from school. I need to just dumb this down. I need to feel better in the moment rather than understanding why I feel off in the first place. And so, I guess on very simple terms, when I'm looking at my clients through the lens of what's going on with their nervous system. So I'm listening to the things that they're saying. If they are saying things such as, I was never enough for my mom. I could never do it right. I know that right there is going to create a thumbprint for how she interacts with her kids, how she interacts with her spouse, how she shows up at work, in all settings. And so from a trauma perspective, we could say, well, that's just family dynamics. That's not trauma. And on a lot of levels, yes, I'll agree with that. That is not trauma. Trauma is a very overused term. Maybe a more effective or more accurate term would be there is a nervous system dysregulation. So if I'm in a situation where I feel unseen or invisible or attacked or threatened or not good enough or weak or stupid, or those types of things are being activated because I remember feeling this way as a young child and feeling powerless to get myself out of it as a child and not knowing how to change it. And now fast forward 10, 15, 30 years, and I'm in situations that are still activating similar feelings that cause me to shrink or cause me to react and get big and loud. That's a trauma response, but it's really just a nervous system dysregulation. And so I will see that in every single client that comes in. I see it in myself. There's situations where I know, okay, there's something going on with my body right now that I need to understand. Why am I feeling so threatened in this moment? Because of that joke that person said at me, or, that derogatory statement or what have you. And so we don't always have that kind of awareness, but I think that when a person begins really doing their work from a therapeutic standpoint, they begin to understand, oh, so it's not that my spouse or my adult child is, doesn't think I'm good enough or doesn't believe, it's not that I'm not lovable or unworthy of it. It's that my nervous system is telling me that. And so from a trauma perspective, I can use trauma modalities to help heal the nervous system, which is what, like Ben mentioned, all of these different modalities, whether it's EMDR or lifespan integration or any type of somatic approach. ART is another one. There are so many excellent trauma approaches, but they're really just nervous system regulators. And the cool thing about this approach as well is that when the nervous system is healing in these areas, when it's done, it's done. Like, I do not ever see it get reactivated. It's not like they just walk out of the office and they feel a little bit better right then. And I see this I've got plenty of therapists that I supervise that have also provided ART as well as EMDR, and that healing happens. Now, that's only the nervous system piece of it, right? And so if I don't also do the work that's going to help me feel good about who I am, even if my nervous system is no longer dysregulated or I'm not feeling activated, I may still function in the same way. I may still show up in life just kind of with my head down and not believing that I can do more or that I am enough. So there's those two elements. But as long as a person is dysregulated, marriage counseling is going to be really hard. And that's where when I have clients that come in and they say, well, we didn't want to come back to marriage counseling because we were working with this one therapist and all we did was fight. Every week we'd go in and fight, and we were actually getting along better outside of therapy. And it's like, okay, well, that's not the goal, right? The goal isn't to make, that should not look, that's not communication, right? So we really want to get individuals in a place where they can not only calm themselves and not require their spouse to always be the one that's regulating them, because I see that a lot. If I feel upset, if I feel anxious, if I feel irritated, it's your fault and you need to make me feel better. And then if you're having a hard day and you can't make me feel better, then you're a horrible spouse. And we see that play out quite often. And so when both spouses can take ownership for at least what their bodies are doing and be able to say, I need you, and the spouse can say, I hear that and I want to be available to you, or I want to validate your experience, or I don't feel threatened because you are asking this of me, or I don't feel criticized. So it's really a nervous system piece that we're looking at. It's not, I think so often people think of therapy as it's what's going on up here, but the majority of it is down here. If we can get this calm and regulated in the way that we would have felt as a young child before life happened to us, what I find is that my clients make the best decisions for themselves. They don't need a therapist to tell them how to live their life. They don't need some influencer online to tell them how to live their life. They begin making better choices for themselves.
When we get out of that fight or flight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When we get out of that
fight or flight is
we
another
can finally
simple
start
term.
to make some decisions. And I love what you said about awareness, because I know just from experience working with people that you work with, your ability to educate, your ability to help them increase their awareness of what's going on is pretty remarkable. And in that, I watch them move into a place of having agency, a place of being able now to make choices where they felt pretty trapped.
Yeah, I'm not a victim. I'm not going to blame my circumstances, that I actually can say this works for me or not. And if you don't agree with that, or if you want me to stay stuck, if you want me to stay in a dysfunctional relationship, this really isn't going to work. The unhealthiest of relationships are rigid relationships that don't allow air and movement in them. But when we can change and grow and both partners accept that, or not just partners, but a parent and an adult child, because I see it on both sides where we'll have a child grow into adulthood and they're wanting an adult relationship with their parent, and the parent is continuing to want a little child that does what they tell them to do, or maybe could manipulate them in ways that used to happen. And that's a harsh word to use, but that's how it feels to the adult child, is that you don't see me, you don't validate, you're not allowing me to become who I want to become. And that may look like I have different attitudes and beliefs, and I see things differently than you do, and that needs to be okay.
Even hearing you describe that, I'm thinking that's a situation where the adult parent wants the reinforcing loop, to use a systems thinking theory.
Exactly.
And the child wants to change the loop.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they want to alter it. And so, when you think through ART or these EMDR modalities, are they in essence trying to break the reinforcing loop cycle? I mean, are we trying to create a different response to our nervous system so that we don't stay in the loop?
They do break it. That's the thing. And there's been times that I've said to clients, you are going to show up because of the work you're doing. You are going to show up different in your relationships. Yeah. And that may not always feel good. You may have, someone in your family or somebody that doesn't appreciate you not doing it the way they want you to do it. Yeah. It's very inconvenient for you to change. So be aware that even though you're healing, it doesn't necessarily mean that life is going to be easier. And that's a big decision. And some people there's one client in particular that stands out for me. She was married to a highly functioning alcoholic. They had been married since they were not married. They'd been together since high school. And so had lived all these years together, but he was a highly functioning, very successful alcoholic. And her dad had been an alcoholic, and it had been a very volatile home. And she finally came into therapy, and she says, I am so triggered because when my husband drinks too much, he gets very reactive with our teenage son. And I go into the same trauma response I would have when I was a kid. And she's like, I can't do it. It's got to stop. And she did such good work with setting boundaries and saying, I love you, but I can't keep doing this. And I will never forget the day. She'd gone from being a stay-at-home mom to, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to figure out how to make this work for me. And one day she came in and she said, I've thought a lot about this, and this is what we do. He drinks, and I clean up the messes, and I don't want to be without him, and I don't think he's ever going to quit, and I'm not willing to walk away from it. And I knew at that moment I had to honor that. I couldn't disagree with her. And so a lot of times people make choices based on what feels comfortable to them, even if it's not healthy. And no one can judge that, right? Yeah. It's easy on the outside to say, why did that person stay, or why did that person go back, or why did they take that kind of abuse, or why did they do that to their partner? Why did they keep stepping out? And until we're never going to be in someone else's shoes, we can't really understand the why. But when you see those patterns that you talk about, those feedback loops, and how we want to maintain familiarity, even if it's not good, even if it's it's comfortable, but it's dysfunctional.
Well, you get used to it, right? I mean, we are in the pattern, and it's hard to disrupt it when we've gotten used to that's how we relate and interact. For what it's worth for listeners, I actually did ART personally on some things that happened from my childhood. And it's interesting, as recent as this weekend, with certain people who I would have normally had a response with, it did not exist. Yeah, and it was odd to be fearful of those situations, interacting with people. And so I stay away from them. But what I've recognized even, this last weekend is that those same responses that I would have expected to come from myself here that you described.
Yeah, that visceral experience.
Yeah, just like heart rate, anxious, can't get a breath. It wasn't there.
Yeah.
Almost surprising that trauma response doesn't exist the same.
Yeah. And when it's not there, it allows you to just be, right? You get to decide now, do I want to engage with this person? Yeah.
Kind of like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
So I want you to go there and just talk about that, because this is now where you start really recognizing if I don't have my victim, my hurt, then what do I do?
My protection to avoid or...
Yeah, because sometimes that gives us a stance or a feeling of, I don't know if victim is the right word, but it becomes part of who we are. It kind of defines us. It gives us, internal purpose to act the way, we act. So how do you see, through whether it's couples or individuals that you work with, once they have worked through those things, is there a moment in time where they have to kind of recalibrate life and say, who am I now?
Absolutely.
Without that, what do I do?
And that is scary. And I've had clients say, my life was easier before therapy because I could dissociate, I could avoid, I could numb, I could do all the things that I was doing, and I knew how to do it because I've been doing it for decades. Yeah. And now I'm present, I'm looking at it, I'm deciding whether or not I can navigate in this relationship in the same way. One of the things that has been really interesting, you had mentioned earlier, just the social media piece. And I made a post on social media a while back that I got a really odd response from that I did not expect at all. It was actually, I think I left work one day and I had been dealing with two different couples where there's some really toxic behavior going on between them. And it just made me think about how, people will decide to not talk to you and control you through silence and all these kind of things. And I just talked about some of this behavior. It's all I talked about, but I didn't mention, not on purpose, but I didn't mention couples. And when this post took off, by and far, I would say that 95% of the comments were from either adult children that had gone no contact with their parents, or it was the parent being estranged from their adult child. And I didn't see that because I wasn't even thinking that. I was thinking romantic relationships. And so all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, this is a big thing happening. And we also see a big influence with social media, coaches, and therapists alike. If this doesn't work for you, you leave. If this doesn't work for you, you draw a hard line and you walk away. And sometimes we do have to put in those protective. There are relationships that are dangerous. But by and far, what I tend to see when I'm working with those types of clients is it's very confining and it's not liberating. It doesn't provide the agency that people are looking. They want to feel free, but all they're doing is removing themselves from the discomfort. But it still follows them to bed at night. It follows them into new relationships. They end up working for that person at a new job clear across the country. Like, we find personalities that will activate those similar feelings. And so if we really want that agency, that freedom to be able to say, I want to be able to go and do and engage with whoever I want and still have healthy boundaries, then when you begin to regulate your nervous system and not feel so reactive, it not only allows you to be very present in those situations, but it also allows you to see the other person in their own pain or in their own inadequacies or their own emotional immaturity or their own trauma response. Because in most of those situations, if someone is reacting or acting a certain way towards you that feels offensive or hurtful or triggering, they've got their own stuff too. But when we are in a triggered state, we can't see that.
Well, and then we're dealing with systems too. Systems always find a balance,
bouncing off of each other.
And if one piece of the system changes, if one piece of the system, let's say, gets fixed, it throws the system out of balance, and the system will fight hard to get back into balance. Yeah. And sometimes that means pushing that person back into their old behavior or their old role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, even from just, this is an old example from when I was working in rehab. I mean, this honestly would have been like 30 years ago. But I remember oftentimes we would have, I saw this happen more than a handful of times, where we would have a spouse haul their husband or wife. Usually it was the wife hauling the husband into drug and alcohol counseling or rehab to detox and to, sober up. And within the 8-week course, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks of outpatient day treatment when they were coming in during the daytime intensive outpatient, then the wife would be upset because, well, we're having our family barbecue and why can't you go? Well, there's going to be alcohol there. Uncle Joe's going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'm not in a good place to be there yet. I'm not ready. Maybe one day, but not right now. And the wife is now upset because the husband's not willing to go to the very barbecue that he was, completely smashed at 6 months earlier. But you see, it's like, but this is what we do. And so, that systems it is a really hard thing for people to acknowledge. And some people will say it was much more comfortable, even if it was, I knew how to deal with the hurt. I knew how to deal with the discomfort of it because I grew up in it my entire life, rather than just being able to clearly see I'm ready for something different. And this is making me sick. And a lot of times it's when people start to get physically ill that they realize I can't keep going back. Like, it's my guts hurt. I'm having migraines. I'm having muscle tension that's now causing problems with my skeletal, my back, my shoulders, my neck. So it's usually the body will get to a point where it says, I'm done. And that's what forces somebody to really make those changes. But it's so much better when we can find people before they're at that breaking point.
Yeah. When you think of your practice, is this the theme that people are finding you, that something's off or they're ready? They're really looking for some variable change in the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people are at that point. And if they're not, I can be kind of particular about who I meet with, but that's the wins. I mean, that is what makes our job so exciting, is when you see people that move through and navigate to a place where their life is transformed and they're happy and they don't need therapy. It's interesting to me when I see clients get to the end of therapy. And it's not usually even decided. We'll be in therapy the day of, and all of a sudden we both are kind of looking at each other like, we're here. Like, and I've noticed clients almost feel bad, like they're like, do you think I need to
Is this
come?
graduation day?
Yeah. Like they feel like they're leaving me, and I'll say, this is exciting. I almost wish I had, a trigger where I could pull down all the, the balloons
Yeah.
and woohoo, it is. It's
Ring
an
the bell like
incredible day.
when somebody's
Yeah.
cancer-free
Yeah,
finally, at the hospital.
Exactly. I mean, that's the exciting thing is that I will even tell couples that my goal is for you guys to not be spending your time or your money sitting here with me, but to be going on a date with us time and money every single week. Like that's how they should be living their life, not hanging out in a therapy office. So that's always my goal, is to get individuals to a place where they, from an autonomous place, they are making really good decisions for themselves and they're happy.
Love that. So good. Tell us more about your practice and this curriculum that you're building.
Okay,
Hype yourself. Tell us all the good you're doing, because I know it's a lot.
The practice is awesome. So Desert Consulting has existed since 2015, so 11 years. I've got licensed therapists, marriage family therapists, as well as mental health counselors. I have the blessing, which I really think it is truly an honor to be able to supervise student interns as well as post-grads that have to get their required hours in order to become fully licensed. And it's just the neatest experience to be able to watch these therapists become great in their own way in what they're doing. I've recently been doing some interviews with certain potential supervisees, and that's one of the questions they'll ask me is, what does supervision look like with you? And my goal is to figure out what they want to become, or how they view change happening in a person's life in the therapy room, and help them become the best at that. Not become a little minion of me, but really, it excites me to see some of my therapists in the office being able to refer people to them, knowing they're going to get the best care with this person, not from me, from this person. You need to see this person, and knowing that they are just evolving and becoming great at what they do, and that there's that kind of variety. And I've got therapists that are really, really good with adolescents and really focused on sports counseling, which oftentimes involves perfectionism and anxiety and things like that. I've got excellent marriage family therapists, and the thing that's been neat too is I've always told all of my supervisees, if you want to be a good therapist, regardless of what niche you choose to focus on, you need to choose a modality of some sort that will heal the nervous system. Because whether they're coming in for the need to address some perfectionism or a marriage or addiction, they're coming in because they do not feel good. They're coming in because this is happening and their head hurts and they're not sleeping and they just don't feel good. And so being able to help get that body functioning better. So all of our therapists have been trauma trained. We've got art therapists, ART therapists. I've got EMDR therapists. I'm a lifespan integration therapist. And so it's nice to be able to bring some of those approaches in. I've also had the privilege of working with having therapists that are yoga certified and licensed marriage and family therapists. So they bring a very somatic approach into their therapy as well. So there's so many different ways for the body to heal, and I would never say that my way is the only way, because I've seen some really, really neat things happen on so many levels.
What's unique about St. George maybe to other areas of the country? I mean, do you interact with other therapists throughout the state, maybe even nationally?
Yeah, I have a lot of, there are a lot of therapists that I am in contact with throughout the state of Utah. I have some therapists outside of the state. Most of my training, or at least my trauma training, was through professionals up in the Seattle area, up in Washington. That's where Lifespan Integration was founded. And so there's quite a few in New Mexico. I've got therapists I'm connected with in Florida. There are quite a few. I don't know that I would necessarily make a connection between outside of the state of Utah per se. Yeah. I think even within the state of Utah, therapy changes quite a bit from the clientele you'll see in, say, southern Utah compared to northern Utah. Insurance can make a big difference. Affluence can make a big difference. We've got a lot of business owners here in St. George, and so in some ways it makes our life kind of easy because we've got a lot of clients that can come in during the daytime because they're making their own hours, which I know that if I was working in Ogden might be a little more challenging. If I was working in Brigham City, that might be a little bit more challenging. Not that there aren't independent people that make their own hours in some of these other communities, but it's different. Because we do see a large majority of people that it's a different clientele here, which has made, in my opinion, it's made business easier, just because it seems like there's a lot of flexibility there.
How about in terms of their ability to work through things? Because there's probably a little less anonymity in southern Utah than there is in northern Utah.
Yeah, people are a little more protective. I think sometimes I've noticed, I mean, I've worked in the Logan area and I've worked in the St. George area, and I know that I experienced a lot more success with people wanting to be involved in group, like setups and counseling. It seems like that has been something that's a little more challenging for therapists on most levels. Most people that I know that have attempted or tried to do group gatherings, support groups. Support groups may be a little bit different, but people are private. People are very private. And I guess that's true anywhere. I mean, that's part of why we are bound to confidentiality is, people don't want their laundry aired, and we can respect that.
How do you define stigma in mental health in St. George?
I honestly, I think that this is something that's changed considerably. I think it's more of an age thing. I think that, and whether we give credit to social media or just these younger generations that we're looking at, mental health it's cool. Counseling is cool now. And so I have to laugh. I had a client come in and she's like, well, we just moved to the area and we needed to get our therapist and our attorney. And I didn't know that that's what we did, but it's now.
I love that. Therapist, attorney, soda shop, and I got my car wash. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. I got it.
Set up.
I got it. But no, I think that the stigma is becoming less and less. People are recognizing. I have a lot of people that I hear nowadays from many different age groups, but probably I would say more in like the 40s age group where people are leaning more toward, it's just good. Like we just need it. Everybody needs therapy. And whether that's creating more self-awareness or whether that's understanding why you get into that loop and that reactivity, or how to strengthen your communication or your ability to validate your partner. I feel like there's a lot less of that. And honestly, if there is a big stigma, those individuals aren't coming into therapy.
Yeah.
Their spouse might be dragging them in.
Right.
And then we've just got to, get them to drink the Kool-Aid. We've got to get them to buy in. But usually that's not a hard thing too, because I think that people have an idea of what therapy is, and it's something that they saw on some old show, and it was either high conflict or it was laying on a couch just talking about all the horrible things in your life. And I think that now people are seeing that, this actually isn't as weird as I thought it was going to be. And this person I'm working with is actually just kind of a normal, hopefully semi-normal person. And I think one of the things that's very important to me is making sure that there's no space for shame at all in my therapy office, regardless of what someone's bringing in. And that's usually what keeps people out of therapy offices, is just that shame of acknowledging what they've struggled with or where they've been or what they're doing, and having to acknowledge that. And then what is this person going to think about me?
Yeah.
Well, I think, and again, back to your style, seems like therapy's moving more in the direction of a coaching style, where we are doing more education, where we are spending more time, increasing awareness as opposed to just solving problems or analyzing, which is maybe what we used to do a lot more of. And now, that education, that lifting, that lifting awareness and lifting, the load with them instead of for them, or,
I really want my clients to understand why the healing is happening, because the coolest thing in my opinion as a therapist, I love seeing a client finish therapy, they're doing good, they're making good choices, they're feeling peaceful inside. And then maybe 2 years later, I get a phone call and they're saying, okay, I want to work on this thing. Can I schedule 2 sessions? And, and they come in and we knock it out. And they know how their body works now, and they know how to heal this hang up or this new issue that's come into their life. And that is neat, because it's not me fixing them, but it's them knowing there's a tool here, and I can approach my therapist and I can have this healed. And that's pretty cool, because you're just empowering the client rather than owning all of it yourself. And you can teach people, but until this part is healed, until their nervous system is responding differently, it doesn't really matter how much they know. And that's, in my opinion, that is one of the things that I see people that are pretty healthy do great with self-help books and little reels off social media. But when we can't stop how our nervous system is reacting, it doesn't matter how much you know. You get stuck in that uncomfortable situation, and your heart's pounding and everything's going on. It's no matter how many times you tell yourself to count to 10, breathe. It's like we just want to take care of that so it doesn't keep hijacking you. Yeah.
I was on a guy's trip in St. George, several months ago, for a bunch of high school buddies of mine. And we were chatting, and they were asking me a bunch of questions because they see what we're doing in mental health, and that I'm married to an LMFT, so we're all in on mental health. And so they had a bunch of questions for me. And this is a group of men's men, truly like therapy soft, how good, can it be just to sit and talk about your problems all the time, this kind of sentiment. But it was interesting after the 3 to 4 days together, we had this ongoing joke of, so if I called it performance coaching, and I didn't say their names, but over half of my buddy, there were 8 of us, over half had in the last 2 years called and asked for their kids to be in some sort of performance coaching, can't shoot foul shots, struggling at the plate, keep striking out. So when we call it performance coaching, all of a sudden it goes from, instead of therapy, it is
it's a vitamin.
It's about performance. It's about, why is Tiger Woods such a mess still? So talk a little bit more about this idea of stigma is kind of softening. There's a generation that is okay with, therapy, but where is it going that you're concerned still? When you think about maybe even 5 years ago where your practice was, and what do you see today? Do you see some seriousness of mental health, and why?
I know that around COVID, so 5-6 years ago, there were some changes that were made in the state of Utah. I don't know about other states, but there was a real concern for making sure that there was enough mental health services available to the members of the community members of our state. And with that, one of the changes, well, there were a few changes that were made, but they lowered the requirements to become a therapist. They eased up on the hours, and there was a lot of changes that were made with that. The requirements for supervision and who could supervise you, a lot of that got loosened up. And that was a little bit of a disappointment, because when you hear people say therapy doesn't work, I have to look at both sides. First of all, you do have some clients that didn't give it enough. They didn't give it their all. Yeah. But if we're just putting more therapists out there that maybe are not as ready to be providing these services, then we do kind of step on our own feet. We start to send the message that, I'm just going to sit here and listen to you, but we're not going to change anything. I feel like if a client is not getting better, they're not changing, either I'm not the right therapist for them, or, we're focusing on the wrong thing. And so I think, in all fairness, we have to be becoming better ourselves. And I've seen excellent therapists. I've got to supervise some excellent therapists that have been on this shortened track that are still doing great work. But I do think that there's some risk there. If the goal is to just get more therapists out there and make it more accessible, but the quality goes down. So that is a concern. I also think that there's a real trend right now with social media wanting to be the hard and fast rule of this is what you need to do in your relationships. And I don't know that it promotes healing as much as it promotes hard boundaries and
Yeah.
avoidance. It actually continues to feed and nurture the same things we've talked about, and that is, I'm going to cut you off from my life, but yet we can't. We cannot walk away from those types of things if they're swimming in us. Even when I think about couples, if I have a couple that I know are going to go through a divorce, I've had couples come in and say, we want to figure out how to navigate a divorce without messing up our kids. We just know we're not good for each other. And that's a hard thing to see, because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, the very things that I want to help you with are the things that actually could make you like each other. But in reality, you're going to be dealing with an ex most likely for the rest of your child's life, which is going to be the majority of your life. And so anything that you can do to help that communication and that respect and that ability to just honor each other, rather than, you don't have to agree with each other, but learning how to communicate and show up more effectively is going to make a big difference. But if society is saying, cut this person off or be antagonistic or everyone's out to get you, and that's how I'm approaching the world, that's a pretty miserable place to be.
It's hard to see, it's interesting because all of us as business owners use social media to meet people, right? To market our business, to try to be out there and to be a thought leader and to help people find access to services. And yet at the same time, that very deliverable that gives the cheap dopamine to people is the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at the same time that we are delivering some cheap dopamine, some easy knowledge about self-awareness or mental health, people start to rely on that thinking that's the solution.
Right.
And you just spent 30 minutes talking about really healing the nervous system in order to move on in life. How can a 30-second reel actually heal the nervous system?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because that's been very frustrating as I've gone into that foreign world in my mind, is that I can spend a lot of time sharing really good content and get no engagement. And I can do a dopamine hit, get tons of engagement, but it's the cheap shots, right? It's the stuff that gets people's attention and it feels good to their nervous system, because it's like, yeah, I'm going to get back at them. But it's we have to get them wanting to understand more, or enough to get that buy-in so they can say, well, maybe this could work for me. Maybe this might be helpful.
It really misses the mark. You made me think of somebody that Arden and I worked with in residential treatment, and he came in, he'd been happily married for 10 years and has kids, and comes to us after a weekend of like $20,000 in women and drugs, and he gets into treatment. He's really angry that he's there. He's really struggling. Can't seem to get it together. His countenance is dark and really struggling. And I walked in one day and he looked different, like he'd figured something out. And I stopped and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Man, I think I figured this out." I said, "Really? What'd you figure out?" He says, "This is about shame. This is about shame. I got to deal with the shame." And I said, "Yeah. So what's your plan?" He says, "I got to get rid of what's causing this shame. So I'm leaving my church and my wife."
Yeah, I won't feel that anymore.
What? No, you missed the mark.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that as I was driving over here. I was just thinking about the fact that that is something that I'm seeing more and more with clients coming into therapy, is this mentality of what I grew up with or what I've lived with doesn't work for me anymore. And which is fine for people to make changes, whether it's with their family, their marriage, their faith, whatever it may be. But what the problem that I see is a lot of times people walk away from, and whether that's been encouraged by a professional or not, oftentimes it is, or social media, but they don't have anything in a foundation
Right.
built before they walk. And so they walk away from their family or their faith, and all of a sudden it's like the ground falls out from underneath them. And so I have found myself oftentimes, at least in the last probably 4 or 5 years, telling people, you have got to figure out who you are and what you value and what you prioritize, because you had it created for you for years, maybe even most of your life. Now you're saying, I don't want that. That doesn't work for me. And that's totally fine. But you've got to figure out now what does work for you, because not having anything to anchor yourself to is a scary place. And I've seen many, many times with clients coming in and knowing that they've walked away from a structure that was familiar, that they didn't want in their life. But without any structure, it's very sketchy, and they feel like they're lost. They don't know who they are. They don't know where to go. It's a very dark place.
Using a couple of those words that you just used, go back and use the words meaning and matter and speak to couples or individuals and why that's foundational.
I don't know if I'm going to go down the path you want me to go, but when I think about everything that we're doing, if it doesn't matter, and I think even with my clients, I want to know that I matter not as the therapist, but as the individual. If I'm sitting with a best friend or a spouse or even a parent, I want to know I matter. And this is something we even see with youth as adolescents come in. And too many times I've heard adolescents say, well, my mom doesn't listen to me, or my parents don't listen. And the parent is saying, why won't my kid talk to me? They're talking to you. Why won't they talk to me? And I've heard spouses say that. My spouse won't talk to me, but they'll talk to you. But it's the same thing. Are you listening to them? Do they care? Do they know if you care or if they matter to you? And when we do put that out there, when we're able to take that time to really hear what someone is saying or what they're feeling, why they feel this way, whether I agree with it or not, and that's one of the big pieces that comes up with. Well, I think any repair work in a relationship, I don't have to agree with what you're saying to me. But it is important for me to at least understand how it landed for you and what that might have felt like for you if I want to have a relationship with you. And I'm not saying that as a therapist, although that is important too, but as a partner, as a friend, as a family member, it's important for me to say, I don't get it, but I want to. I want to try. And I think that is something that as humans, we are not, or at least right now, we have a lot of individuals, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to validate. We don't know how to just sit with someone else's experience without having our own or feeling threatened because they have a different opinion than ours or a different experience than ours, even if we were in the exact same conversation. And so learning how to just be able to sit with that and say, I care enough about you that I want to understand. I want to know what that felt like or how my words landed on you. I want to do better. And that is just, whether that's a level of humility that feels too scary, or there's the fear that if I make myself that vulnerable, you're just going to shred me or blame me for every problem in your life. If we could get to a place where there was more humility and a greater ability to just know and accept that we're all having our own experiences and that's okay, wow, the amount of repair work that would happen within families and those intimate, close relationships it would put us out of business.
But that has to matter, doesn't it?
Yeah, has to matter.
Just listening to you, I think about we don't see bands anymore. I'm thinking about growing up, and everything was a band. It was all a band, and now we have all these individual artists. And that has significantly changed. Our society has shifted more to this individual accomplishments, individual lives, instead of community, instead of family.
Yeah.
And is that something that you're finding you have to deal with?
Yeah, it is very much, it's society for sure that I remember reading, I wish I had saved this because for the life of me, I cannot remember where I saw it, but there was a gentleman that did some research decades ago, and it was around change in our societies where 150 years ago, people would live on the farm, live with their parents, get married, their family would live in the same house. They're living with grandma and grandpa. You've got everyone in the same house. You got 3 generations plus in the same house, work in the same land. And not that that's ideal or even possible for many of us, but his whole reason for doing the study was he wanted to understand what anxiety levels look like for these generations where change was not happening like it is today. I mean, change is happening so fast and so readily today, where if I don't like my job, I leave. If I don't like my house, I move. If I'm tired of living in this city, I'm going to relocate it to the other side of the country. We can just change, and that's an incredible thing. I mean, it's awesome that we have that ability to do that. But his whole hypothesis was, is that
always good?
Are our bodies, wired to do that? And so we see these high levels of anxiety, and we can blame them on so many things. And there are a lot of reasons why those things are fed, right? Whether it's hormones, or whether it's change, or whether it's isolation and not being in our groups, our tribes that we initially, when we were living on the earth thousands of years ago, that we stayed safe within our people. And now we're saying, I don't need that, but I don't know that our bodies have caught up to that. So I just thought that was a really interesting study, and maybe there's more to it that I don't know at this point, but I think there's value in understanding who are my people, and am I creating safe environments, but more importantly, in this, if I'm doing it by myself, if I think I'm doing my healing by myself, I have to be able to say, okay, I'm creating my own worth, my own value. I know who I am. I know I'm enough. And I can show up in a relationship without expecting that someone else's words or actions are going to define who I am. And there's a difference between doing that and isolating and pulling back from everybody versus working on me and wanting to be a part of other people's lives and wanting to give and serve and share and love, but not expect that it's your job to make me feel okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
So much there. So much there. I think even hearing you describe that to me, one of the greatest aspects that I think therapy offers people is the ability to be met where they are, but not allowed to stay there.
Yeah.
That therapy is going to move you somewhere. And, you know, I've heard Ben say this several times. You alluded to it there. Something about alignment, you know, that you are misaligned. If something feels off, then there's misalignment in your life, whether that's what your values are, what your character is, what you want to be, but that therapy allows you this place and environment for someone to challenge you to find alignment and to be okay with that.
That's key. That is really key. And yeah, that incongruency. In fact, I think you've probably heard the statement that mental illness is incongruency with what you know and what you're doing, or what you believe and what you're doing, or just when there's incongruency within us, it's going to manifest in some way.
When our values and our behaviors don't align.
Yeah. Yeah. And on simple terms, that's integrity, right? We're taught from a young age to have integrity, but yet at the same time, if we're taught about it, but we may not have had it modeled, and we may not even learn, because it does require not always getting things our way. And as a child, we want what we want, but sometimes that creating that congruency and aligning those things might mean taking the back seat or a second seat to someone else, or being patient, or putting our needs, behind someone else's from time to time.
Leave us with your final wisdom, your final shot. What would you want people to know, whether couples, individuals, families? From your seat, you've sat with thousands of people now over a career. You've met a lot of people. What would you want them to know or think about regarding mental health or therapy? Or
I think that change is good, whether I like it or not, because I'm a pretty boring. I like routine. I like to do things kind of the same way. I eat the same thing for breakfast every day. That's kind of how it works for me. But change is really, really good. And I find myself oftentimes saying to people, I want you to do something counterintuitive to what you would do today. And whether it's in a relationship or whether it's, personally, they're trying to make some change in their life. If you find yourself stuck in maybe doom scrolling on your phone, or spending hours on Netflix, or balled up on your couch, or ducking and bearing it through a job that you absolutely hate, that doesn't feed your soul or doesn't feed the creativity you want, we've got to be willing to say, okay, what do I need to do different? I remember, and I don't know why I did this, but it sticks with me. When I was in college, early when I was young, probably 19, 20 years old, I remember studying and working on papers, or just being in my room, just working and working and working. And periodically I would walk out of my bedroom into the living room where I shared a space with other girls. And because we didn't own any of the furniture because it was all a rental, I just remember getting up on the couch and walking around like the arms and the top of the couch. I just needed a different perspective. I just needed to breathe, and I just kind of needed to see things. And I was driven to do that. I don't know. It's not like I made a decision to do it, but I just remember thinking, I need to feel something different. And even in like a therapy perspective, I am a very experiential therapist. I want clients to feel something different when they're in the therapy room. I want them to have an experience where when they walk out, they know things are shifting and things are different, whether they're responding differently to their spouse or toward life. And so change is good. And I think that staying stuck, staying rigid is dysfunction. Dysfunctional families, dysfunctional systems do not change. They're rigid, they're hard. When we begin to change, it does feel a little uncomfortable and a little wobbly, but man, it allows that breath of fresh air to begin seeing things a little bit differently. When I'm watching my clients, sometimes I'll have clients that will say, well, how do I know when I'm done with therapy? Especially if they're new to therapy, if they've never been to see a therapist before. And what I say to them is, well, we get to decide together. It's not my decision to decide for you, but I'll tell you what I'm looking for. And the qualities that I'm looking for are qualities such as being open and curious and loving and creative and adventurous and forgiving, and they desire connection. Like, I'm looking for all of the qualities that you would see in a young child, because those are all, like, you see that in a 3-4-year-old before life happened to them. They're bouncing and there's no shame, and they could care less if they're streaking through the living room butt naked, and they're living their best life, and they're picking things up off the ground, and they want to taste it, and they want to smell everything. And when we start to learn that life isn't safe and people aren't safe and I can't do anything, and I start to either go into that shell, or I get so big that I'm going to control my environment so no one can threaten me, I'm no longer living with that agency you speak of, but I'm living because this is how I survive. And so that's how I know when a client is at least ready to taper off or just be living their life rather than hanging out with me, is that they're seeing things and they're feeling things that they didn't experience or they haven't for a very, very long time.
I've sat with a lot of therapists, and I've never heard one of them yet say, I will know when you're done when you desire connection more in your life. I think that's fascinating.
And yet,
And
from
so
an
true.
addiction standpoint, that you would say the same thing, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sobriety isn't about not using. Sobriety is about living.
Yeah.
You know, and are we living?
Yeah.
And you don't live without connection.
What is that desire? And I know that, you know, we're near time, but what is the desire? I'm curious, just from both of your perspectives, what is the desire to be known? Right. And I see that in my life, people that I interact with, where people are slowly shutting down. They want to be less and less known. They isolate more and more. I can see where shame has a function in that. You know, they're feeling shame, they're feeling a certain way, and they don't want to be known. The opposite of that is the desire. I want people to know me. I want to get to know them. What is that? What's happening there where someone all of a sudden desires now to be known more, to connect more with others?
Yeah. I had a young man that I was working with recently that he had gone through a pretty severe trauma when I think he was about 13 or 14, lost his dad to a suicide. And I knew that he had experienced this because I'd worked with his family, but I had never worked with him. And so he's coming in now as a young adult in his early 20s, and he's kind of like talking to a wall. And he said, I used to be, I would engage and be funny, but I don't really engage at all. Like I'm trying to picture him going on dates as a 21-year-old, and I'm thinking, well, there's a reason why you're not getting past a second date, because it was like talking to a rock. And we could talk like that, and he knew it. And so what was interesting is that he started to recognize that I feel like I had to be the rock. In fact, my mom told me after my dad passed away, I was the rock. And somewhere that got stored where I just needed to do the status quo. I just needed
be stoic.
Yeah, just be stoic.
Be
and
here.
he was a very, very stoic young man. Yeah. And so it was interesting to see him begin to recognize and see. But one of the things that he came into therapy one week, and I said, so tell me what you're noticing. And he said, well, I was sitting in this place where there were people in front of me, and there was an old man sitting right in front of me, and his collar was kind of flipped up. And he said, normally I would have noticed that, but I would not have wanted to embarrass him. But he said, I just leaned forward and I fixed his collar. This is a 22-year-old man. And he noticed that as, I think, that piece of connection, like part of humanity.
Yeah.
That I don't want this person to be embarrassed, and me helping him isn't going to embarrass him. It's actually just being helpful and supportive. But he said, I would have never done that prior to coming into therapy. And so, and again, that's not something you can coach or teach someone or write about in a book. Those are things that when we are naturally showing up in a more connected, caring way, more of a joined way, we just see it and we do it. We touch, we compliment, we engage with a child. We notice the sunrise. I've noticed we live in an amazing place with the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets. And sometimes I'll be talking to a client and I can tell they haven't noticed anything like that in years. Like they haven't noticed the sun coming up or going down. They haven't noticed the smell of the air changing as the earth is coming alive and trees are budding out. Like they just don't notice it. And so to be able to be more alive it's just an incredible thing. And it's no wonder why children are as excited and curious as they are, because they can feel it all. And then somehow we put on these crusty layers to protect ourselves and we quit feeling and noticing.
Well, and I think a lot of it too comes back to that fight or flight tendency that we live in. Our society right now, with the access we have to information, is not good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because most of the information we have access to is harsh, is scary, is dangerous, is traumatizing, and so when we absorb and soak in all of that in 15 and 30-second clips, and
it makes normal life a lot more boring. And then all of a sudden that becomes the dopamine hit that you talk about. It's I need to be constantly fed and stimulated. And
if every time I put my head up out of the foxhole I get shot at, I'm going to stay in the foxhole. Yeah. I'm not coming out. I'm going to stay in here where it seems safe.
I think just one more piece I would add to that question, because I think it is a good question. I think there's an element of our society in general with just the digital technologies we have, which are phenomenal. Like we don't want to go backwards, but at the same time, we've become very comfortable with not having to be face to face with people, right? I mean, we can text on our phones, we can leave a voice message and not have to engage at all. We can have meetings, we can do business without even meeting someone face to face for a lot of professions. And so it then all of a sudden becomes very uncomfortable unless you are naturally an extrovert and feed off of needing that social connection. I think for the rest of the world that isn't extroverted, it becomes really hard to step back into those. I'm not an extrovert. And so it's very comfortable for me to do my job and go home and isolate. And that's comfortable. I also need that to decompress. But I think that we've got a lot of people out there that are just, it's uncomfortable. What used to be normal, standing in the grocery line and talking to the person next to you about what they're cooking for dinner. We don't do that. If we've got 15 seconds that we have to wait for the register, we're on our phones checking something else. We don't engage. And so the thought of engaging like that is just so out of the norm anymore that people don't know how to do it, nor do they want to.
And I love your example of the young man fixing the collar of the gentleman in front of him.
People culture, not productivity culture. It's fascinating. It's really amazing. Cecilie, how can people, or where can they find you and Desert Consulting?
So Desert Consulting, we provide therapy. We're in St. George, Washington County, southern Utah. We provide services all throughout the state of Utah. Some of my therapists are licensed in some of the surrounding states. We've got one of my therapists is also able to provide therapy services in Idaho as well as New Mexico. And so there's options there from a telehealth perspective. And you can see me on Instagram @SitWithCess. And
what's your website?
It is
I was on it recently.
Counseling St. George.
Counseling St. George.
Yep, so counselingstgeorge.com. And on the Instagram account, there are, that's where the courses will be housed. So going back really quickly to the question you had asked, when I had put that one reel out there in reference to a toxic romantic relationship and got such a enormous response from these adult estranged relationships, that kind of pushed me to, okay, that's going to be the first course, because there's obviously a big problem with this. We've got kids that are walking away, grandkids that aren't knowing their grandparents, grandparents that have no clue what to do with this and are doing things that are making it even worse. And so that's the first course that's going to be out there, but there will be, my plan is to do a number of them that will be accessible through there and through the website, CecilieOtt.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Well,
Thank you.
we'll put it up. All the courses, all the links we'll have on our website as well. So
Thank you.
The Lift and Make Lighter podcast is brought to you by LÉVO, a primary mental health care provider. At LÉVO, we specialize in comprehensive mental health assessments, diagnoses, and treatments for all ages. For more information, visit levomind.com. That's LEVOmind.com.